All right, that's the fastest I've ever gotten a computer to work on a projector. It's pretty good. My name is Jenner Holden, Vice President of Information Security for Taser. We'll talk a little bit about what Taser does that has anything to do with privacy and cloud and those kinds of things, which might be new to some of you. In practicality, that means I play CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. I play Chief Compliance Officer, and sometimes I play Chief Privacy Officer. Right? You get to do all those things depending on the day and the situation. Taser's not a huge company. We have a big name, a big brand that most everyone's heard of, but we're not gigantic. We're about 700 people today, but growing really fast. Right? Based out of Scottsdale, Arizona, have a pretty good size set of software engineers in Seattle, and then offices all over the world in Amsterdam, London, Australia, Canada's coming online, and things like that. By the way, anyone here, maybe it doesn't want to work. Anyone here work in law enforcement? Have anything to do with the law enforcement world? Okay, good. So a lot of this will be new and hopefully interesting to everybody. Anyone been tased before? Yeah? Was this a controlled tasing or like a wild Friday night? Controlled? That's unfortunate. The wild Friday nights are much better stories. They really are. I've been tased. Greg, have you done it yet? What? So quick introduction. Greg Hughes over here is our manager of trust and compliance. So all the things I'm going to talk about, the actual work is done by Greg and his team. And somehow you haven't been tased yet. Okay, interesting. All right, I'm going to just try and get this thing to work. Just a second. So the reason it wasn't working there was because Microsoft Office just popped up all the updates that I need to apply. It's a feature. It's a feature. It's good. It's comforting to know that updates come, though, right? Absolutely. As you know, in the U.S. certainly, but even in other places around the world, law enforcement is under a lot of scrutiny right now. Right? A lot of people looking very closely at how law enforcement goes about their business, how they handle sensitive or tough situations with certain folks that they deal with. And this is made exceptionally transparent to everyone because we're all walking around with cameras. Right? Anytime, imagine in any kind of a downtown situation anywhere around the world, if there's an escalating altercation between law enforcement and a citizen, what happened? What's everybody else doing? Boom. Pull out the phones. Right? You got all sorts of video going on. And of course, those videos get used in all sorts of different ways. They get sent to the news, they become evidence, they get edited and put up on YouTube, and who knows what, right? So a lot of scrutiny for law enforcement. You can pick your incident, right? There's incidents that happen every day. There's some really big international ones that everybody knows about. Well, Taser, one of the things that we're trying to play a role in is to help law enforcement, police communities, be a positive force in our communities through technology, right? There's a lot of different things that we need to do to solve this problem, but technology is a critical part of it. And two technologies that Taser's been working on lately that we think are helping this problem are first, the less or non-lethal tasers that everybody knows about, right? Certainly in an escalating situation, if you can stop somebody from being aggressive or attacking you without having to shoot them with a gun, well, that's a good thing, right? So that's what the Taser non-lethal weapons aims to do. But then there's also the body cameras, right? Anybody know if their local law enforcement in their area is already using body cameras? Right? So it's growing very fast. That part of our business at Taser is growing extremely rapidly. Right? There's a lot of interest in body cameras all over the world from all law enforcement agencies. If they're not already using it, they're looking at it. If they're not already doing a trial on it, or they're already doing an RFP. So Taser was the first, probably the first, I think, very, very close to the first company to come to market with body camera for police officers. Interesting story for how we even got there was we first started putting cameras on the bottom of the Tasers. Right? Way back in 2006-07, everybody would get sued every time somebody was tased. Right? Somebody gets tased, the officer that pulled the trigger gets tased, gets sued, the police department gets sued, and Taser gets sued. And then the neighbor across the street that happened to witness it gets sued too. Right? So everybody got sued. So Taser thought, well, how can we help demonstrate that these capabilities, these weapons, are being used effectively and in the right way and in the right situations? Well, why don't we put a camera on the bottom of the Taser? So that started happening in 2000, 2006, 2007. Problem is, that only captured once the trigger was pulled. Right? You pull the trigger, and then it shows what happened afterwards. It doesn't show anything about what escalated the situation to the point where they had to use force in the first place. So that gave rise to the idea of, well, can we make cameras small enough to put on officers so that they can see the entire interaction that they had in any situation where they had to use force? They had to make those difficult split-second decisions. So Taser started working on body cameras for officers in about 2007, 2008, and first came to market with them in 2009. Now, if you remember back, when did the first iPhones come out? Anyone know? Remember when the iPhone 1, what year was that? 6 or 7, right? So making a camera small enough to fit on an officer's body in 2006 or 7 was not like a given, right, like it is today. Right? Technology wasn't quite there. So even the ones in 2009 that were first released didn't sell at all because they were big, they were clunky. The officers are like, I already have like a whole army of equipment on me. I'm not going to wear that thing, right? It was big. But the concept was there. Right, so it took a few more years to refine the technology to become small enough and light enough and have a long enough battery life to actually be useful in a real law enforcement situation for an entire shift. Right? And those started to sell 2011, 2012, and then something really big happened in 2014 that really threw the body cameras into the public consciousness, and then the market took off. Anyone remember that one? Ferguson, right? Ferguson, Missouri was 2014. Serious situation happens where there is no video. Right? There was no video of what happened, so everyone's wondering, like, if we had video, what would have happened in that situation? There's no way to know how that situation would have been different if there was video, but we can tell you that in similar situations since then, where there has been body cam video, even when it clearly showed that the officer did something terrible and was completely in the wrong, the public angst and the riots didn't occur. Right? Interesting kind of social science going on there, where even when the officer absolutely did something wrong, if there's video of it that shows clearly that the officer was wrong, and then the public sector, the police department, the chief can take responsibility for it right away, the riots and the angst and the anger does not seem to bubble up quite as much. Right? We've seen that. I can give lots of examples that we don't have time for today where that has happened. And certainly in situations where the officer was in the right and most reasonable people would agree, yeah, in that situation I would have pulled the trigger as well. That video is shown, everyone can see that, the riots and the angst and the anger don't happen. Right? So a lot of positive coming out of body cameras to help shed the truth, the light on a certain situation. So that's what Taser's been doing for the last few years. Now what that means with all these body cameras all over the world is they have to store and manage all of that video data, that video evidence. No small task. For an individual officer, it's about 1 gigabyte per day of video per shift, right? So they're not recording everything generally. They usually turn it on per interaction, then turn it off at the end of the interaction. That usually leads to about a gigabyte of per day per officer. So for normal-sized police department of 150 officers, that's 56 terabytes of video per year. Even just storing that amount of video and managing that amount of video is a huge stretch for most law enforcement agencies. Most law enforcement agencies are not big organizations. They do not have dedicated IT staff. They maybe have one police officer that does IT stuff. They try and leverage the technologies provided by the county or the city or things like that. They're not really equipped to manage that amount of data year over year constantly, because it's not just about storing it. Think about the life cycle of a body cam video. You have to add metadata to it. What's the category? Who is involved? What's the GPS coordinates and all those kinds of things? Well, do we keep it forever? Does it have a life cycle? What if it has to go to court? What if it needs to be reviewed by the chief? What if we need to redact it? What if we need to go on and on and on? There's a whole bunch of features and life cycles that happen with these videos that no law enforcement agency is going to be able to build the tools and the technology to do that for themselves. And I can confidently say no law enforcement agency, because we're currently doing business with and have as our customers the biggest police forces in the world. the LAPD, the London Metropolitan Police, some big agencies in Australia have determined on their own, and they have huge IT departments. Like, it does not make sense for us to build our own storage mechanisms and custom applications to manage the life cycle of these body cam videos. It just doesn't make any sense. So what Taser's developed is a thing called evidence.com, cloud-based digital evidence management system for all digital evidence. Mostly body cam video right now, mostly from our cameras, but it is equipped and ready to go to ingest digital evidence from any source. Competitors' body cams, dash cameras from the cars, CCTV, right, which is all over a lot of places, interview room, audio, in-the-field crime scene photos, et cetera, et cetera. All digital evidence managed in the cloud. Questions so far on kind of where Taser's at and what we're doing in the cloud with body cams and things like that? Stories clear so far? All right, good. Okay, who would want to hack police stuff, right? So imagine now we've got probably over 5,000 customers, over 5 petabytes of police video data in evidence.com, which is growing rapidly. I don't know how far out it is, but we'll be adding a petabyte per quarter and then a petabyte per month here pretty quickly. Because the ramp up of body cameras around the world it's a steep curve. It's happening quickly. So who would want to get to that data, right? These are the people that keep me up at night. These are the folks that I worry about. Hacktivists, so everyone's heard of Anonymous? Yeah? They like to hurt police any way they can hurt police, right? They're very conflicted, by the way, about Taser, because they hate the police, and Taser sells stuff to the police, so Taser must be bad. But putting cameras on officers is a good thing to show all the bad stuff the police do, and Taser sells the cameras, so then Taser's good. Right? So they have a hard time dealing with us. They don't know. But at any given moment, they probably hate us for something. And so we do get a lot of fun times with Anonymous pretty regularly. One example I'll give, this was fun for my team. Mesa Police Department, this has all been in the news. Mesa Police Department in Arizona had an officer-involved shooting, right, a very unfortunate situation where I think the officer has actually been indicted, and that's going through the court system. The grieving widow of the guy that was killed, so the guy that the officer shot, a couple of days later, not that many days later, the grieving widow of this guy goes on the local news in Arizona, live on the news, and says, I need to see what happened in this video. I need to see what happened to my husband. Anonymous, I know you can get to those kinds of things. The video's in evidence.com. Please go get that video. Right? Okay, my team was excited about that. That was all right. Woo! We didn't want to sleep this weekend. What? Okay, so that kind of stuff happens, right? Hacktivists don't like law enforcement. Pick an incident. If it's on video, body cam, it's probably in evidence.com. We got to worry about those guys. Organized crime, right? You can imagine situations where you have video of a mob boss or someone who's involved in organized crime. The video that's going to convict them is in evidence.com. If they can get that video tossed somehow by creating doubt about its veracity, they're going to do that. And they have money to spend, so they'll pay really talented hackers a lot of money to go do that. Nation-state intelligence. We're an international company. We have international clients. So some of our clients are really worried about Chinese intelligence. Some of our other clients are really worried about the national, the NSA for the U.S. Right? So we need to worry about how involved are nation-state intelligence, even though it's law enforcement data. Right? Are they going to try and surreptitiously get access to some of this stuff, even though they could easily go through the legit channels through law enforcement? Right? So we worry about that. And then, of course, even predatory traders. Maybe not something everybody deals with, but as a public company, it'd be a really, really good way to make some money to short Taser stock, cause a massive data breach of evidence.com, make money, right? So those are the kinds of things that we worry about. But that's all security. That's all traditional tactical security that at least I grew up doing, that I've done most. But what about privacy, right? Are there different kind of privacy things that we need to worry about with law enforcement data in the cloud that are a little outside the normal security scope? And certainly there are, and we're going to talk about some of those. One thing I want to point out is that I don't think that we could possibly, Greg and I and our small team, could possibly tackle the scale and scope of privacy concerns and regulations that we need to worry about globally with all our customers unless there were standards out there, right? Unless we had partners like Microsoft having evidence.com on Azure that are already tackling those standards, ensuring that the infrastructure that we use is already compliant with those standards that we can build on, right? I couldn't imagine trying to convince every individual customer around the world that have good, strong practices around the privacy of their data without something like ISO 27018, right? An accepted privacy standard that we can be certified to, that they understand, and everyone has to do all these audits. Within US law enforcement, there's CJIS, the Criminal Justice Information System, has a security policy that says that any law enforcement data, of which evidence.com holds a lot, needs to meet these set of security standards, and there's privacy standards within the CJIS policy as well. Right? We couldn't possibly go to every single individual agency and prove it over and over again. Right? We need some central mechanism where we can certify ourselves to a standard that they accept. Certainly, we also do ISO 27001. We're working on FedRAMP for the federal government. I should mention that's not up here, is we're also just finishing up the Cloud Security Alliance, the STAR certification level 2, so the actual audited certification level for that, which I think is a fantastic standard for cloud providers. And I spend a lot of time trying to convince our law enforcement customers around the world that they should use something like the CSA as their standard for cloud providers. Because one interesting element that we deal with is we are the first major application or system of theirs that is cloud-based. Law enforcement around the world, as is natural, likes to keep things close, where they can control it and see it and smell it and touch it. So putting their data in the cloud is a big step for most of our customers around the world. And in order to help them get over that step, now at the same time they realize they can't do this video body cam thing without going to the cloud. So we're the first major provider that's kind of helping them get over that hurdle and realize the benefits of the cloud. So having standards like the CSA and things like that help us a lot. We can point to, like, we're not just doing this ourselves. This isn't Taser making it up. Right? These are internationally accepted standards that all the big boys like Microsoft are doing that we're helping to protect your data. So more specifically, what are some of the privacy questions and concerns that we get from law enforcement that we have to try and answer? So I'm going to go through their questions and talk about how we try and meet their requirements or questions about privacy, specifically privacy and compliance of their data. So one, who owns my videos? Right? Anybody else here work for a company that runs a cloud service? Yeah? Do you deal with that question with your customers? Like, who owns the data? When I put it in your cloud, who owns the data? Yeah, the customer should, but how clear is that to the customer? Right? Is it absolutely crystal clear to the customer? Is it in the contracts? Is it absolutely ironclad as you can possibly make it that the customer still owns the data? You're just a custodian. You're just a rented hand to help do some things, right? That needs to be, in my mind, that needs to be super crystal clear. That needs to be very transparent, right? Yeah.
So you're also talking about the agency. What about the individual in the video?
Oh man, you're hitting all the good stuff. Yes, I was going to get to that. We'll talk about it now. We have this additional nuance where our customer is a law enforcement agency. It's easy for us to make it clear that they own their video data, right? And the video data, that we're just a custodian. But what about the additional privacy considerations for the public, the people in the video, the citizens of that community, right? Those kinds of things. I can tell you right now, it's not clear, right? That varies by state, that varies by jurisdiction, that varies by country. That is a very nuanced and difficult question to answer, right? What we're trying to do, though, is to make sure that we build in the technologies within evidence.com and our body cams to be able to satisfy whatever is decided within a community, right? We may have some countries or customers where the video is law enforcement's and no one else is allowed to see it, and it's that law enforcement agency gets to decide everything that happens to that video. Okay, we need to provide the access controls and the audit trails and all those kinds of things to satisfy that need. We may have other countries, customers, jurisdictions where, the person in the video has a right to see that video whenever they want to see it because they're in the video. Therefore, we need to provide tools to be able to help our customer, the law enforcement agency, produce that video, give it to the requester. What if it's a mass request and it needs to be done bulk? Right? That's not a small technological task. So we need to be able to support that workflow in jurisdictions where that's what they've decided to do. Because as you might imagine, there's a different answer to that question all over the world. We're just trying to make sure we build the technologies that can satisfy it depending on who it is and where it's at. Did that answer that question? Yeah. I guess we'll talk about redaction down at the bottom. I already have it on there. Who can see my videos? Okay, so yeah, I'm putting this video up in evidence.com, but who can see it? Who could go watch that video if they wanted to? And what trust do I have, or what proof do I have that only the people that I want to see that video can see that video, or actually do see that video, right? So certainly we have to build in audit mechanisms and audit trails and things like that to be able to demonstrate to a customer that the only people that even can access that video are the people that you have authorized. Whether that's through the access control systems that we give you and you pick the roles and the permissions and who can do what, or in the rare cases where we have some administrators on the back end that theoretically could go look at videos if they needed to. And honestly, we do have a couple, right? We're not an infrastructure provider where we can run the hardware and never have to access the data, right? We're a software as a service provider. So our people are writing the code, dealing with the actual videos being stored in the databases and the metadata in the databases, right? We're a little bit closer to it than a Microsoft or an AWS. So we do have a few people that if they really needed to, could get into those storage areas to fix things, in which case they could access video. So how do we provide transparency to our customers about who those people are and how we control and protect that access, right? So what we provide are pretty standard contractual things that says, we'll give you the list of who those people are, we'll do whatever vetting and clearances that you require us to do for those few people, and then our internal security team has these specific monitoring checks and audit trails to watch and demonstrate whenever that is done, whenever that access is used, it was for a legitimate purpose, and we can tell you what that purpose was. Right? So we have a lot of controls around that. Unfortunately, what that means for those few administrators that actually have that level of permission is they might be the most security cleared people on the planet, right? Because they got to do the US checks for CGIS. We've done some Canadian checks for Montreal. What else are we working on? Some of the UK stuff. And a few others are coming down the road, right? Yeah, good question. Subpoenas, do I have that up there? I'm going to cover that under who has the right to request my videos. Yep. So don't let me forget to talk about subpoenas under that. Okay, so regardless of who can see my videos, who actually has seen my videos? Who has viewed it, downloaded it, shared it, those kinds of things? Right, so we have built into the system to try and address that concern a pretty robust audit trail to allow the customer to see exactly everything that's ever happened with a video, from the time it was uploaded, who looked at it, who downloaded it, who shared it, who viewed it, all the details they might even need to show in court about chain of custody for everything that happened to a video, but even for an internal investigation, right? Just to see who was it that shared this video with the prosecutor that maybe we shouldn't have? Or who was it that downloaded the video when we didn't want it to be downloaded? And things like that. In my mind, I think this is a transparency feature that has to be more prevalent in cloud solutions, right? Really robust and deep audit trails so you can see who exactly has done what with the data. Yeah, you're trusting the cloud provider to do a lot of work for you, but that doesn't mean that you need to give up the ability to see what it is they've done for you. Right? You should still be able to see all those details. And we're able to satisfy a lot of privacy concerns in the countries we work in because we do have this robust audit trail. Right? They can see at a deep level exactly who has done what with any individual piece of evidence. We do have some kind of funny stories where, for example, a prosecutor shows up in court. They should have viewed the video ahead of time. They show up in court, and they say, yes, or no, Your Honor, I haven't seen the video. I haven't had a chance to review it yet. And right in court, the police officer can pull it up and say, well, actually, the audit trail shows that you watched it 4 times yesterday, right? So that happens occasionally, and then people get the idea. Oh, right, evidence.com has audit trails. That's different than when the video is on a DVD. You can see exactly what happened. Where is the data stored? So it's been talked about a bunch already today, the data sovereignty concerns, and we certainly run into that very frequently. Where in the world is the data center, the application residing where that data is stored, is an important question for our customers. One, sometimes there's actual legislation, legal requirements around it. But even when there's not, there's actually very, very real kind of political considerations around that when it comes to law enforcement data. Right? Who wants to be the police chief in a country that's just starting to use cloud that has to explain to your parliament that I'm putting all of our body cam videos on servers in the US? Even though there's no law against it, even though I'm completely confident that the security of that system is top-notch, no police chief, no commissioner wants to be the person to try to explain that to their parliament, right? So there's a very real political considerations for this data sovereignty as well. So much like Microsoft, we've taken the strategic step that, yeah, we're going to keep data in the countries or the regions where those customers are. That's where we're going to keep the data. And we certainly leverage infrastructure partners like Microsoft that are having these data centers, these Azure deployments all over the world in order to do that. Right? So UK data stays in the UK, Australia data stays in Australia, Canada stays in Canada, US stays in the US, etc. With some regionalization. I forgot who it was that mentioned that it's going to settle out, and it won't be every country having their own clouds, but there will be some regional clouds. Like we've been successful in convincing New Zealand that it's okay to use the Australian region. Right, that's kind of not a big deal. Right, in Europe, we'll see how that works out. Questions up to this point? Well, one interesting thing we deal with on the where is the data stored is where does the person sit who administers the system? Right, so one thing we still do is we still have our top system engineers. They handle the tier 3 problems. Are U.S. citizens and they sit in the U.S. We do have some sysadmin work that happens, or sales engineers and stuff like that work in the regions, but we still have U.S. citizens in the U.S. that have to administer the Australian system and the UK system and the Canada system. So far, that's worked out. Right? We've been able to convince them that the controls that we have in place ensure that the data is still not being pulled into the U.S., even when they go do some of that administration in those regions. And we'll see over time how well that continues as we continue to grow. Certainly once we hit a certain size, we'll probably be similar to the model that Microsoft's taken where German citizens are running the German data center. I suppose we'll hit a scale at some point where we may have something similar. Who has the right to request my videos? Right, so that's to the subpoena. So in a lot of places around the world, and certainly in the US, you have these Freedom of Information Act laws, right? So who can request the video and who can they request it from? Right? Can a citizen come to Taser and request a video from evidence.com through a Freedom of Information Act request? Well, our stance would be no, please don't do that, right? That should be through your local jurisdiction, right? Through the law enforcement customer to which those laws apply, and then we build the technical mechanisms that allow them to actually provide that video when that legal FOIA request comes in. Right? So far, so good. That works out pretty well. Well, what about subpoenas? Right? What happens when you have a subpoena from a citizen or from one law enforcement jurisdiction to another to get the video? Again, much like Microsoft, our stance is that's not our video to give away. That's not our subpoena to respond to. That needs to go to the owner of the data. Right? So far, so good. All the subpoenas have been routed to the actual law enforcement agency that owns the data, and they handle it how they handle it, and if they need to provide it, they can access evidence.com through all the normal mechanisms and provide that video. And that's how we've done it so far. Questions up to this point? Yeah?
You do get subpoenas, though, asking for data from you, even though you're not the owner, right?
So we have not yet had a subpoena that I'm aware of asking us for the data. Now we make it very clear in our agreements, and anytime there's any wind that there might be a subpoena, like we make it clear, no, you go to the owner of the data. So I'm not aware that we've actually received a subpoena yet. They've all gone through the actual owners of the data, the actual law enforcement agency that's involved. Yeah. Yes?
I think you were saying that you were not subject to data transfer regulations because you're keeping the data in Europe. We had people who have said that doing some work in the U.S. and data transfer agreements in place.
Yeah, good question. So for those international customers, I mean, one, in a practicality, we really don't ever pull the data across from the region, right? Our engineers go into that environment and work on it there. The data is not coming back across to the US in all practical purposes. And oddly enough, law enforcement has some interesting carve-outs when it comes to some of these privacy regulations. Law enforcement data is actually not treated the same as general PII in most of the countries that we deal with. So while we do have to worry about and comply with those requirements, it's usually an agreement between us and our law enforcement customer, as opposed to the general regulation that might apply to the general population PII. So it really is kind of one-off discussions and agreements in the purchasing process, the RFP process with a particular country. I guess not in the strictest sense, but in a framework-wise, yes. In a sense, kind of like that. Yeah. Yep. And honestly, the only time that we ever end up with international data in the U.S. is when the law enforcement agency, for example, when they have to return a broken camera, and they have to send it to us to retrieve the data off the broken camera, which is very few and far between, and that's all part of the contract whenever that needs to happen. And we're growing at a rate where actually more of that is actually happening in country. We don't have to send it back to the engineers in the U.S., right? It's just a scale thing. Yes? Shane, no. So the question, if you didn't hear it, was if there is a data breach, this is completely theoretical, who would be responsible for notifying any of the individual citizens that are in the videos, right? Interesting question. Luckily, I have not crossed that bridge. It would almost have to be the law enforcement agency, because there's no way we would know who is in what video, right? We would know which video belongs to which law enforcement agency. There's no way we would know who is actually in what video. So that would have to be up to the individual law enforcement customer to do that. Now, of course, we have agreements about how quickly we need to notify any customers of any potential breaches. So hopefully that would be a relatively quick process. But if it was a large amount of data, that would not be easy to go figure out exactly who's in what video. Maybe the specific subject they would know, but if there's ancillary folks in the video, that's going to be tough. Yes?
What metadata do you attach to each particular file? I'm guessing you don't attach a whole lot, so you don't know what's in any video. So you couldn't provide, and a potential hacker couldn't find it either.
Correct. So which metadata is attached to a video is largely up to the decisions of the law enforcement themselves. Right? Our system provides the ability to attach a bunch of different metadata elements, everything from just tagging, and then the tags, they can put whatever they want. Right? They can have their own custom tagging situation, GPS coordinates, the category for the type of incident it was. All those kinds of things are built into the system. What an individual agency decides to put into that metadata system is up to them. Right? They may be putting people's names and addresses and stuff like that. Chances are not really. Because what usually happens is they have a records management system already. Right? That records management system is what contains criminal history information, exact what happened in an incident, who was involved in an incident, and stuff like that. They just attach or link up the video to the records management system. So the metadata around the video is pretty minimal, and all the details are in the records management system, in most cases. Right? But again, like we're not at the level of detail where we're watching exactly what metadata each customer is doing. We're providing that capability, and they use it how they will. Yep. All right, other questions? These are good questions. All right. And finally, how can I redact my videos? You can imagine scenarios, happens every single day, over and over again, where a legitimate Freedom of Information Act request is made for a particular video or set of videos. There is an onus, usually in the law, where they need to redact certain parts of that video before it can be released publicly, right? Either there's minors, or there's license plate numbers, or people not related to the incident in the background, and things like that. So how can I redact that video becomes a really big privacy question, right? And the onus of meeting that privacy obligation is on our customer, who in turn then is requiring us to build sophisticated technologies to enable them to do that efficiently, right? I mean, if doing it the hard way would be frame by frame, right? Imagine taking 2 hours of video, multiply that by 10 or 20, and going frame by frame to blur out a face. Well, that's not going to scale. That's not going to work. And in fact, if that was the way it was today, a lot of body cams would not be in the streets. Police departments would say, I can't do it. We can't deploy body cams and capture this video because I will be swamped with redaction requests that we cannot fulfill. Therefore, we're not going to do body cams. So it's on us to try and provide robust redaction technologies and tools so that that public purpose can still be fulfilled and still meet the privacy obligations. So we're working hard on making it as automated as possible. Current state-of-the-art is object recognition, like here's a head, and we can follow the head around in the frame and keep it redacted. Not quite facial recognition yet. You still have to go back and view it and make sure it didn't mess things up in a few places and clean it up. But it's still a lot better than it was. But it still needs to get better, right? Good, true, automated redaction is going to be critical to the wide adoption of body cameras and videos. Because there is in most countries and most locales, a public right to these videos in certain situations, but there also has to be this privacy constraint where certain things are redacted. All right, that's all of the big topics I wanted to cover. Got you out a little bit early unless there's like a half an hour worth of questions just waiting.
Is that a hand raise? No, it's just a...
If you want to dig into any of the details for how we're doing some of this, Greg's your guy.
Okay.
I'm actually just curious about your role in the organization, because you said you're the CISO.
Yep.
But you're talking about a lot of product features.
Uh-huh.
Do you play on both sides, the product development
Yes.
and in the organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what role does the security team play in product development, right? Luckily at Taser, we're in a position where we play a big role in product development, which isn't always the case. I've worked at other companies where that's a hard thing to do for the CISO to get into the product and make sure privacy and security features are built into the product. Not so at Taser. They recognized early on when they brought me on board that we need security expertise in the product development lifecycle in order to sell these products. Like, trust is a huge thing. We won't be able to sell these products unless there's really strong, robust trust. So a part of my team spends a lot of time doing threat modeling on the product features. Certainly we do tons of pen testing on the products. We look carefully at various features of the products to make suggestions on how we can help support privacy regulations actually in the products, right? So we do spend a lot more time in the product development lifecycle than probably a lot of companies have their security and privacy teams actually do, which is interesting, refreshing, and also like terribly time-consuming all at the same time. Yeah.
I see videos on Facebook all the time where the faces are redacted. So I just assumed it was an app you can download. Is it a significant thing to redact?
So yes, it's a significant thing. Facebook actually probably is state-of-the-art right now on facial recognition and image processing and redaction. They're not giving us their technology. Oh, shocker. And there is a fundamental difference that's not obvious for most of that video versus body cam video. When you have a stationary camera and it's HD and the faces stay pretty much in the camera, you can actually do pretty good facial recognition. Now, put the camera on a body and it's bouncing around and there's people moving all which ways and it's not full HD necessarily, all of a sudden facial recognition doesn't really work. Right? So it's an interesting distinction when you see some of the cool fancy facial recognition. Yeah, they're not yet doing that with body cam video, right? That's bouncing all over the place and officer running down the street and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
You're saying you're working internationally. It's okay, they can hear me. So, in terms of your contract,
Yes.
are you trying to say, look, we're a cloud-based service, here's our contract, I can come change it on the edges, but that's a product, or do you have more work since you're international and you have to, and you said you're not that big yet, and you have to kind of be involved in the contracting stages and kind of help the contracting team and legal deal with that?
Yep, so evidence.com body cameras is a very new thing in law enforcement. So certainly with the bigger agencies, this is a custom negotiated contract almost every time when you're talking about LAPDs and the London Metropolitan Police, and certainly the first big agency in a country, right? We're helping to figure out the contractual language for that region with those first few customers. So it is a very laborious individual process right now. We are making that more efficient. We are becoming more standardized. I mean, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong. It is much more standard in the U.S., right? Large deployment in the U.S., so it pretty much is what it is, and everyone, and we meet all the CGIS requirements, and it's very clear how we've done it in the U.S., and so there tends not to be near as much back and forth. We're just now having discussions in Germany, France, Italy, countries like that. Guaranteed there'll be a lot of custom negotiations on how the contract's going to work in those countries, right? So a little of both depending on where you are. Yeah. Yep.
Since you have extra time, this is a little bit off the subject.
I can describe how tasers work too if you really want to.
But this is more of a law enforcement question, but there might be someone who knows the answer to it. It seems like it's not really easy to get a police report, even if you are named in the police report. Not that that happened, by the way.
Not that you know.
But you know, I've just found that out through talking with people.
Yep.
So what is the law? Most like local laws, or what is the law about getting video of yourself that's been, you know, that the police owns for one reason or another?
So I actually don't know the difference between like a police record that has you in it versus a police video that has you in it, as far as the request laws work, and I'm sure it's different in every state. I just know that it is a regular and onerous thing for people to request videos. So I don't know if that's because the law is different or if it's just more interesting to request videos. But that's certainly happening a lot nowadays.
It's kind of a function of the law.
Yeah.
A video would be prima facie evidence of the crime, generally evidence of use in ongoing criminal investigations. It's exempt from statutes like the Freedom of Information Act or the California Public Records Act. Whereas the police report has historically been considered a public record because there's a public interest in knowing who was arrested and why.
Okay, interesting. Very good.
Also that the laws governing how much of your personal privacy exists when you're in public training.
Yep.
Somebody takes camera pictures.
Yep, and that's like ongoing law right now in discussion, and it's in a different place in every jurisdiction around the world on you know, what's allowed, what's public, what's not public. It's quite a discussion now in a lot of states on when police are wearing body cams. Okay, they're out on the street, this is happening, we all get that. Well, what about when they need to walk into a home? Okay, does the privacy requirements change when they need to walk into a home? Well, as Taser, we're not getting involved in what the law should be, right? That's a public policy discussion, but we're watching it closely because we may need to build features and capabilities into the cameras to take into account the difference between out on the street and in the home. Right, so there's dealing with a minor versus an adult and the whole thing. Yep.
There's actually some interesting research done on the impact of police body cameras on domestic violence, where in some states they found, I believe in Arizona, that when police are wearing body cameras and investigating domestic violence situations, they actually have a higher success rate in the prosecutions. Typically because the culprits plead guilty on the basis of the video evidence, or more likely to plead guilty.
Yeah.
It's an interesting.
In places around the world that don't have the law enforcement trust issues that we have in the U.S., they're still deploying body cams because they're finding far better rates of convictions for things like domestic violence and things like that. So there's a number of different use cases for body cameras beyond just transparency and police behavior. And it's pretty interesting to see which parts of the world are adopting them for what reasons. Yeah. Good. Any final questions, or are you done? You made it through the day. It's time to end it. All right, I think we're done, Jeff. All right, thank you.